Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better. Mastering Stress 5. Welcome back. The stress-related topics discussed in the previous module are about as far as most people ever go in their understanding of how to master stress. If there's enough material there to satisfy you, consider skipping this module until and if you are ready for more. After all, undoubtedly you've previously worked out some stress relief techniques that you use when you realize that you're too stressed. As long as you're satisfied with the consequences of using them, they may be good enough for now. Our context is the beginning half of the 21st century. Part of that context is that we take productivity, timed performance, for granted. A good book about that development is David S. Landis's Revolution in Time. A much more general book about how we got where we are today that I strongly recommend is Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens. The idea that it is our performances or doings that really matter about us reinforces an unfortunately limited view of our nature. That's really the topic of this and the next video. How can you tell if you're ready for more? Try this. Imagine yourself flourishing financially, emotionally, physically, interpersonally, and intellectually. Even if you are not yet experiencing all 5 of those kinds of well-being, are you able to imagine yourself doing so? Why not? There's nothing to prevent it. Really do it. Take even just 2 minutes to imagine yourself living like that. Imagine watching a movie of your typical day, in as much sensory and other rich detail as possible. For example, when would you wake up? What would you wake up having slept on? Where would you be? Would you be alone or with someone? What would you do before breakfast? What would you eat for breakfast? What would be your morning routine? And so on. If possible, pause this video while you do that. Don't cheat yourself. Please proceed only after doing it. All right, here's the big question. Would your leading the kind of life you just imagined be ultimately satisfactory or fulfilling? At least in terms of being less stressful, it would very likely be better than your present life, but that's not the question. I'm inviting you here to ask, in effect, if that would be the best or ideal life for you. Put another way, would it be maximally full of purpose or meaning? Would it be the most valuable kind of life for you to live? Is that really your understanding of living well, of being a sage? Almost certainly, you've had moments of living well, moments in which there was no stress whatsoever, optimal moments. What would a life filled with more moments like that really be like? Is it even possible? Think of the very best moments of your life so far. What characterizes them? What makes them different from ordinary moments? What makes them better, more satisfying, more fulfilling, more meaningful than everyday moments? Why do you feel that you are living deeply in those moments and not so much in others? This brings us to the key question of this video, namely, what is the most important stressor of all? Here's a hint. What's missing from optimal experiences that is not missing from ordinary experiences? Again, please pause this and let yourself wonder. I'd like you to think through for yourself this idea. Our best moments are free from the most important stressor of all, which is the awareness of time. The phenomenon that sometimes philosophers, in other words, serious lovers of wisdom, call internal time consciousness. Is that true of your peak experiences? When you were a child, fully engaged in play, wholly oblivious to time, weren't you living well? Did you ever master, say, a musical instrument after years of regular practicing when it happened? What's it? In this example, it would be playing the piece of music well without trying to play it well. Living well is beyond trying to live well. What about, for example, mastering a sport-specific skill, such as shooting free throws in basketball or firing a slap shot in hockey after many hours of trying to learn the skill? When, say, you hit your first slap shot perfectly, What did that feel like? Did it feel almost as if it happened by itself rather than that you did it? Wasn't it a moment also out of time? Wasn't it an experience that lacked ego or self-consciousness, almost as if you weren't the one who did it? Didn't you find it wholly satisfying and fulfilling? Of course, it wasn't a world historical event, but I suggest that it was a concrete example of living well. Of course, it's just an example, and a minor example at that. Still, haven't you at least occasionally had such experiences? If not, you have them to look forward to and won't really understand what I'm trying here to describe. If so, you don't need any more examples because you already understand what I'm talking about. Following ordinary usage, we could call them moments of Zen. In fact, they are moments of no thought. Although they are experiences in time, they have a timeless quality about them. They feel outside or beyond time. Inside them, there is no time consciousness. After such experiences, it may be possible for you to determine how long in clock time they lasted, but there's no sense of duration inside them. Do they last for seconds, minutes, or hours? That question is senseless with respect to them. That's the point. When we have fully satisfying or fulfilling experiences, they always have a timeless dimension. By way of contrast, all ordinary experiences are temporal, bound by time. They are never experiences of fully living well. For example, think back to when you were a child in school waiting for class to be over so you could go do something you considered more important. Think of an employee watching the clock, waiting for the shift to end. Think of a soldier counting the days until the end of deployment. If all the moments of your life have so far been like those, you have not yet tasted living well. You've been stuck being time's slave. Those moments, all ordinary moments, are afflicted by time consciousness. Extraordinary experiences, those of living well, are free from the heaviness of time consciousness. They flow. I hope that's sufficient to convey the critical idea of this video, namely that consciousness of time is the greatest stressor. When we don't prioritize well what we do, we may experience time regret. Are you familiar with Harry Chapin's song Cats in the Cradle? If not, it's readily available on YouTube. We think of misusing time as wasting life. That's another example of time as a stressor. Especially if you are inclined to disagree, notice how almost incessantly you think about the future. Aren't you almost always trying to think and behave today so that you will have a better future? You hope and want your tomorrow to be better, more fulfilling, more satisfactory than today. That's especially true when we are down for whatever reason, isn't it? True, you understand that you can't actually live tomorrow today, but it's certainly possible to imagine it. Notice, though, that there's a built-in conflict with hoping for a better future. Why? The future is where death is. Life might be better tomorrow, but that's also when death might occur. This is a paradigmatic example of the normal human condition of being bound by thought. As temporal beings living in the conditioned and relentlessly changing world of forms, we are enslaved by time. Everyone understands this. There's no denying it. It's a fact that the psychophysical forms we identify with are temporal, essentially conditioned by time. Furthermore, the more we focus on that, the more stressed we become. Death destroys the value of all our doings. Many people spend their whole lives engaged in activities they hope will make their lives ultimately meaningful. Even when those activities are valuable today, though, what value could they have after death? Sure, we're able in the ordinary sense to learn how to manage time well. In other words, we can learn how to organize our activities in such a way that we could get more done and so are more productive. That, though, is just more time slavery. If time really is the greatest stressor, why isn't there more discussion about it as a stressor? I don't know. My guess, though, is that it's because few time management experts, psychologists, and others like them have a clue about how to reduce the stress created by time bondage. If you think that time management techniques will get you where you want to go, that's fine. I myself, though, am skeptical that they will. How could they? They assume that your value as a human being comes only from what you do, your activities. Yes, your activities are important. Obviously, unless you've already been doing what it takes to satisfy your biological needs, you wouldn't still be alive. Is your intrinsic value or worth, though, limited only to what you do? It may only be your doings that are valued by most other people, but that's irrelevant. What really is your ultimate intrinsic value or worth? That value is not restricted to your doings. More fundamentally, you are what you are, regardless of your doings. In other words, what you are is not limited to what you do. Restricting thinking about yourself to just what you do ignores what you are. That's the topic of the next and last video here. Thanks for your attention.